Chapter 17 of Anna Karenina, Book 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Cole. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Translated by Constance Garnett. Book 6, Chapter 17. The coachman pulled up his 4 horses and looked round to the right, to a field of rye, where some peasants were sitting on a cart. The counting-house clerk was just going to jump down, but on second thoughts he shouted peremptorily to the peasants instead, and beckoned to them to come up. The wind, that seemed to blow as they drove, dropped when the carriage stood still. Gadflies settled on the steaming horses that angrily shook them off. The metallic clank of a whetstone against the scythe that came to them from the cart ceased. One of the peasants got up and came towards the carriage. "Well, you are slow!" the counting-house clerk shouted angrily, as the peasant, who was stepping slowly with his bare feet over the ruts of the rough dry road. "Come along, do." A curly-haired old man with a bit of bast tied round his hair, and his bent back dark with perspiration, came towards the carriage, quickening his steps, and took hold of the mud-guard with his sunburnt hand. "Vozdvizhensko, the manor-house, the count's," he repeated. "Go to the end of this track, then turn to the left, straight along the avenue, and you'll come right upon it. But whom do you want? The count himself?" "Well, are they at home, my good man?" Darya Alexandrovna said vaguely, not knowing how to ask about Anna, even of this peasant. "At home for sure," said the peasant, shifting from one bare foot to the other, and leaving a distinct print of 5 toes and a heel in the dust. "Sure to be at home," he repeated, evidently eager to talk. "Only yesterday visitors arrived. There's a sight of visitors come. What do you want?" He turned round and called to a lad who was shouting something to him from the cart. "Oh, they all rode by here not long ago to look at a reaping machine. They'll be home by now. And who will you be belonging to?" "We've come a long way," said the coachman, climbing onto the box, "so it's not far. I tell you it's just here. As soon as you get out," he said, keeping hold all the while of the carriage. A healthy-looking, broad-shouldered young fellow came up too. "What, is it labourers they want for the harvest?" he asked. "I don't know, my boy." "So you keep to the left and you'll come right on it," said the peasant, unmistakably loath to let the travellers go and eager to converse. The coachman started the horses, but they were only just turning off when the peasant shouted, "Stop! Hi, friend, stop!" called the 2 voices. The coachman stopped. "They're coming, they're yonder," shouted the peasant. "See what a turnout," he said, pointing to 4 persons on horseback and 2 in a char-à-banc coming along the road. They were Vronsky with the jockey, Veslovsky and Anna on horseback, and Princess Varvara and Sviazhsky in the char-à-banc. They had gone out to look at the working of a new reaping machine. When the carriage stopped, the party on horseback were coming at a walking pace. Anna was in front beside Veslovsky. Anna, quietly walking her horse, a sturdy English cob with cropped mane and short tail, her beautiful head with her black hair straying loose under her high hat, her full shoulders, her slender waist in her black riding habit, and all the ease and grace of her deportment, impressed Dolly. For the first minute it seemed to her unsuitable for Anna to be on horseback. The conception of riding on horseback for a lady was, in Darya Alexandrovna's mind, associated with ideas of youthful flirtation and frivolity, which, in her opinion, was unbecoming in Anna's position. But when she had scrutinized her, seeing her closer, she was at once reconciled to her riding. In spite of her elegance, everything was so simple, quiet, and dignified in the attitude, the dress, and the movements of Anna, that nothing could have been more natural. Beside Anna, on a hot-looking grey cavalry horse, was Vassenka Veslovsky in his Scotch cap with floating ribbons, his stout legs stretched out in front, obviously pleased with his own appearance. Darya Alexandrovna could not suppress a good-humoured smile as she recognized him. Behind him rode Vronsky on a dark bay mare, obviously heated from galloping. He was holding her in, pulling at the reins. After him rode a little man in the dress of a jockey. Sviazhsky and Princess Varvara, in the new char-à-banc, with a big raven-black trotting horse, overtook the party on horseback. Anna's face suddenly beamed with a joyful smile at the instant when, in the little figure huddled in a corner of the old carriage, she recognized Dolly. She uttered a cry, started in the saddle, and set her horse into a gallop. On reaching the carriage, she jumped off without assistance, and holding up her riding habit, she ran up to greet Dolly. "I thought it was you, and dared not think it. How delightful! You can't fancy how glad I am," she said, at one moment pressing her face against Dolly and kissing her, and at the next holding her off and examining her with a smile. "Here's a delightful surprise, Alexey," she said, looking round at Vronsky, who had dismounted and was walking towards them. Vronsky, taking off his tall grey hat, went up to Dolly. "You wouldn't believe how glad we are to see you," he said, giving peculiar significance to the words, and showing his strong white teeth in a smile. Vassenka Veslovsky, without getting off his horse, took off his cap and greeted the visitor by gleefully waving the ribbons over his head. "That's Princess Varvara," Anna said in reply to a glance of inquiry from Dolly, as the char-à-banc drove up. "Ah," said Darya Alexandrovna, and unconsciously her face betrayed her dissatisfaction. Princess Varvara was her husband's aunt, and she had long known her and did not respect her. She knew that Princess Varvara had passed her whole life toadying on her rich relations, but that she should now be sponging on Vronsky, a man who was nothing to her, mortified Dolly on account of her kinship with her husband. Anna noticed Dolly's expression, and was disconcerted by it. She blushed, dropped her riding habit, and stumbled over it. Darya Alexandrovna went up to the char-à-banc and coldly greeted Princess Varvara. Sviazhsky, too, she knew. He inquired how his queer friend with a young wife was, and running his eyes over the ill-matched horses and the carriage with its patched mud-guards, proposed to the ladies that they should get into the char-à-banc. "And I'll get into this vehicle," he said. "The horse is quiet, and the princess drives capitally." "No, stay as you are," said Anna, coming up, "and we'll go in the carriage," and taking Dolly's arm, she drew her away. Darya Alexandrovna's eyes were fairly dazzled by the elegant carriage of a pattern she had never seen before, the splendid horses, and the elegant and gorgeous people surrounding her. But what struck her most of all was the change that had taken place in Anna, whom she knew so well and loved. Any other woman, a less close observer, not knowing Anna before, or not having thought as Darya Alexandrovna had been thinking on the road, would not have noticed anything special in Anna. But now Dolly was struck by that temporary beauty which is only found in women during the moments of love, and which she saw now in Anna's face. Everything in her face, the clearly marked dimples in her cheeks and chin, the line of her lips, the smile which, as it were, fluttered about her face, the brilliance of her eyes, the grace and rapidity of her movements, the fullness of the notes of her voice, even the manner in which, with a sort of angry friendliness, she answered Veslovsky when he asked permission to get on her cob, so as to teach it to gallop with the right leg foremost, it was all peculiarly fascinating, and seemed as if she were herself aware of it, and rejoicing in it. When both the women were seated in the carriage, a sudden embarrassment came over both of them. Anna was disconcerted by the intent look of inquiry Dolly fixed upon her. Dolly was embarrassed because after Sviazhsky's phrase about this vehicle, she could not help feeling ashamed of the dirty old carriage in which Anna was sitting with her. The coachman Philip and the counting-house clerk were experiencing the same sensation. The counting-house clerk, to conceal his confusion, busied himself settling the ladies, but Philip the coachman became sullen, and was bracing himself not to be overawed in future by this external superiority. He smiled ironically, looking at the Raven horse, and was already deciding in his own mind that this smart trotter in the char-à-banc was only good for promenade, and wouldn't do 30 miles straight off in the heat. The peasants had all got up from the cart and were inquisitively and mirthfully staring at the meeting of the friends, making their comments on it. "They're pleased too. Haven't seen each other for a long while," said the curly-headed old man with a bast round his hair. "I say, Uncle Gerasim, if we could take that Raven horse now to cart the corn, that would be quick work." "Look ye, is that a woman in breeches?" said one of them, pointing to Vassenka Veslovsky sitting in a side saddle. "Nay, a man. See how smartly he's going it. Eh, lads, seems we're not going to sleep then." "What chance of sleep to-day?" said the old man, with a sidelong glance at the sun. "Midday's past, look ye. Get your hooks and come along." Chapter 17. Recording by David Cole, Medway, Massachusetts.